Welcome to the No Code MBA Show podcast. In this episode, I speak with Mike Heap, the founder of AskAI, which is an AI assistant chatbot tool. You'll learn how Mike grew AskAI from zero to over $20,000 in MRR. You'll learn how they think about the competitive landscape of AI apps and how they built AskAI using Bubble, which is a no-code tool. This episode is brought to you by No Code MBA. If you want to learn to build your own AI applications similar to AskAI, which is the app that we talk about in this podcast, or other text and image generation apps, even if you don't know how to code, check out No Code MBA's Building Apps with AI course and use the promo code PODCAST10 for 10% off your No Code MBA membership. Let's go ahead and get into this episode. Hey, Mike, thanks so much for joining the No Code MBA show. Really excited to talk to you. Since the last time we spoke, you were working on a slightly different product than you are now. Yeah. And we did a live event, which was really cool and successful. But I'm excited to kind of learn about the transition and kind of what you've, what you all are up to now. So I guess maybe we can just get into it. I guess if you could tell everyone what you were building before and what that transitioned to, and maybe talk a little bit about the decision to transition what you were building.
Yeah, sure. So when we started the year and when we last spoke, we were building the no-code AI model builder, which was essentially a platform that allowed you to create fine-tuned models without code. So you would upload a CSV file with prompts and completions, and then drop that into the platform. And then that would generate a fine-tuned model that you can access through OpenAI. And that was something we launched at the start of the year. We had kind of a few weeks, we managed to make some revenue from it. And essentially what we found was that when we had a kind of survey that we get asked at the start where we'd say, like, how are you using it? How do you want to use it? And the thing that came quite apparent quite quickly was that people wanted to kind of chuck in any form of data in any format, pretty unstructured, and get something useful out of it. So people wanted to build chatbots. People wanted to use the data that they've uploaded, but in ways where they didn't want to do the work, the curation of it in order to get a good input in the first place. So realistically, very few people want to kind of create 500 rows of curated data in order to get some good output. So the first kind of insight was that we were seeing, okay, people want to put in relative rubbish and get some magic out, which is always a difficult thing to address. So we'd also seen at the time, both Alex and I being kind of active on Twitter, we'd seen quite a few people who are building things, or developers specifically, who are building things that were like talk to your podcast or talk to your book. And they were kind of one-off projects that were spun up. And so when we saw these, we kind of realized immediately that we need to make a platform that does this in a way that's super easy for people, especially non-technical people. So what we ended up doing was when people signed up, we asked them what they wanted to use it for. If they wanted to create a kind of chatbot or a conversational bot, we forked them into a different path where we offered them the opportunity to build something that they could just upload data to and create a chatbot out of it. And so at that stage, we hadn't built anything. We had a kind of idea of how we would go about building it, and we were kind of pig-headed in that it was cool and we were going to do it anyway. But we thought we'll try and gauge demand for it while we can. So we essentially just had one page on the site that we forked people to, and asked them to pay us, I think it was $99 for 6 months unlimited access, essentially. And so what we actually saw were we ended up getting about 50 people signed up to that pre-launch. And so it actually generated more revenue pre-launch than we got from the no-code model builder to date, which I think got us kind of a few $1,000s or so. And so that was the kind of realization, the light switch moment where we realized, okay, this is the thing we ought to be focusing on more. And so that kind of made us put our foot to the gas a bit more, and then focus on really building that with the goal of basically creating something completely no code, where you can just drop in data and get something that you can ask questions and get answers out of the back end.
Cool. That's a cool story, and I think something that you all did that I think is really a great example for other entrepreneurs is being willing to listen to the market and kind of listen to your customers and be flexible enough to kind of change directions a little bit if needed, right? And I think that's really cool to hear. In terms of and at this point, were you both working on no code AI model builder full time? Was it part time, or what was the status of that for you and your co-founder?
Yeah, so basically, Alex and I decided pretty much in the new year that we were going to focus purely on one product at a time and not try and get too distracted with things. We're probably a little bit stupid in that neither of us had a tremendous amount of runway. We probably had like 3 or 4 months, but that also kind of put a bit more pressure on us to try and get to a point where we could fund our living costs, which in London is not necessarily an easy thing. So probably a bit naive in that respect, but I think there's also something to be said for putting your kind of feet to the fire with things like that and really pushing yourselves to do something. So yeah, we went pretty much full time from January, February or so, because especially as soon as we started seeing the traction of it and we started seeing kind of sales every day, we realized that we definitely had something, and it was kind of a matter of time before we reached that point where we'd be able to kind of sustain ourselves.
Got it. Yeah, I totally agree. I think being like you really do feel the pressure when you like kind of need to make it work and make money, and it's very easy, I think, when you don't have that pressure to just take your foot off the gas a little bit.
Yeah.
And when you have that pressure, you almost have this like extra clarity about what do we actually need to do to make money. And the forcing function, I think it can be helpful. Obviously, you want to be careful about that and not put yourself at too much risk. So there's pros and cons to, I think, different ways of kind of launching something. But yeah, I think having that kind of reason to push yourself can be helpful for sure.
Yeah, because I think like you see a lot of people who kind of create side projects and they build in public, etc. They get to kind of the $500 a month or something like that, and I mean that in itself is an amazing achievement. And to make any money online from random people is like a crazy thing, and such a small percent of people do that. However, like if you kind of see that as your success, then you're not necessarily pushing yourself enough to try and go further with it. And I think like there was definitely times in the first few months, probably around March kind of time, where we weren't sure if we were going to kind of get to the point where we could fund ourselves quick enough, and looked at doing things like contracting. And I actually took on a contract for, I ended up taking, it was I think 3-month contract. I did it for about a week before I realized that I wanted to spend all my time doing the building, and I didn't want to risk missing out on the opportunity, I guess.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And then so AskAI, which is the product you're building now, it's a way to upload any type of information. It could be a PDF, could be a website, it could be your customer service documentation, whatever you want to upload, and then create a chatbot really quickly and really easily that users can interact with. And is that kind of a good like overall description of the product?
Yeah, for sure. I think the term that we're starting to use a bit more is AI assistant. So it's essentially exactly as you said. You define the source of truth. You define the reference data and the knowledge that AI assistant's going to have. You push all that content into it, and we have kind of a number of ways you can do that through integrations, website scraping, Google Drive, Notion integrations, etc. And then at the back end, you get your AI that you can ask questions to. You can either do that through the UI itself, or you can embed that into a site with like a couple of lines of code you just copy and paste, or you can integrate it into, we currently have Slack, Teams, WhatsApp, and Messenger probably very soon as well.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, I can attest that I'm on your email list, and like every couple weeks there's like a new
Yeah,
feature that you
we
are
try.
releasing,
Yeah.
which is super cool. Maybe that's a good well, actually, before we transition a little bit into how it's built, just in terms of the growth and how has it been since you did move from AI no code model builder? I think that
Yeah.
that's what it was called, which was doing a few thousand in revenue, or had done a few thousand in total revenue to switching
Yep.
to this. And maybe to give listeners context, how long ago did you switch, and then how have things gone since you made that switch?
Yeah, so we launched AskAI on, I think it was about the 20th of February. So we're about 8 months on now. And I think first month, if you take all that kind of pre-sale revenue out, which was non-recurring, it's kind of one-off access. If you strip that out, then I think it kind of went about $3,000 MRR the first month, maybe 6 or 7 the second, up to about maybe 9 or 10 the third, and then we've kind of the growth hasn't been quite as steep since then. And over the summer we had kind of a bit of a flat period, but then kind of growth's kicked up a little bit now, and we're just sitting around just over 20k MRR. And now we're also starting to kind of get more enterprise clients on board, and we're kind of doing a bit more custom stuff as well with some of those guys.
Got it. Got it. Awesome. And in terms of your customer breakdown, so is most of it kind of very small businesses or individuals, and then now you've built up more of a reputation where now you can get more of the larger type of clients. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so I think in terms of like a rough split, so we've had probably about 40,000 people sign up, try it out. Of those, probably since we started, around 800 or so converted to paid users. And then of them, probably 75% are on our lower tier plan, which is like $20 a month. And they're
Yep.
usually people who are playing around with it for themselves. Maybe it's for their business. We get quite a few people who like try it out on a personal account and then want to use it for their business as well. And then we have about 23-24% of people are on our pro plan, which is like $100 a month. And that's probably the one where businesses mostly sit. And then we also have kind of our beast plan, which is $1,000 a month plus, depending on kind of how much content they're adding. And yeah, we've probably got kind of a couple of percent of people on that who are mostly businesses. I think we generally look to, we obviously want to be pushing people more from the hobby to the kind of pro and beast plans as much as possible, really.
Right, right. And how do you acquire those different customers? Like, I assume how you might acquire someone on the hobby plan is going to be very different from the beast plan, or so I'm curious how you all think about that.
Yeah, so we've had, I mean, we're always trying to find kind of new acquisition and distribution channels. And I think right now we're kind of settled on trying to do some SEO work, some programmatic SEO work, along with some kind of standard blog writing, etc. Combining that with, we want to do more interaction on things like LinkedIn. That's where some of our kind of biggest customers have come from, with very little kind of work to date. So I think those are, and then I'd kind of add to that opportunistic type things. So whether that's trying to get on podcasts, or whether that's we had a random opportunity from a guy who was doing a post on Reddit that ended up going viral, and he offered us a spot on that list. So I think that's kind of what we're settling on at the moment. But we've also gone through kind of lots of different things, and I think there's times where they worked, and there's times when they just work because of AI trends. So for instance, probably March, April, we were doing a lot of kind of newsletters and things where people would just put us in their newsletter. We wouldn't even know, we'd just see a spike in traffic, or some influencer on YouTube would do a video on us or something like that. And those, you're just kind of fortunate to have those happen. But then we started thinking, oh, newsletters are a good channel for us. Let's try kind of some paid newsletters. And like the first couple of times they work, but there's definitely a kind of diminishing marginal returns that takes into effect. Like as you do more of these, you're more visible, but less new, less novel. And so kind of that goes away. And I think as well with the fact that there is such saturation of AI tools and products right now, it makes it quite difficult to stand out. And so I think like all these things change over time. I know there's been other products similar to ours that have had a lot of success with things like TikTok and Reels and things like that. And I think there could be potential for that in the future, but I think we generally see the best kind of return on investment for us coming through LinkedIn and coming through opportunistic spots as well.
Yeah, I think that from my experience and just talking to different entrepreneurs as well, especially early on, like it's hard to get multiple channels to work, right? It's hard enough to get one channel to work well
for sure,
for you. And I, I've seen this myself with No Code MBA and other products as well. Like, and it's very tempting, I think, when you see another channel working for someone to try and make that work for yourself as well. But sometimes if one channel is working, then it just makes sense to double down on that channel and keep getting. There's probably a lot more you can get out of that channel before it's going to run out. Yeah.
I think you're totally right, and I think like it's a difficult one because when we launched the tool, and probably even now, like it's hard to define a specific user or niche of a product, especially because there's so many like early adopters into this trying to use it for all different types of purposes, and so that can also make it difficult, like because you have all the early adopters to start with who have a very high threshold for or a very high threshold for errors and bugs and things, and they're quite happy to just muddle through and play around with APIs and things like that. But then like as you progress and as it becomes more common, you get people who are less knowledgeable about AI, who are trying to use tools, and they're less kind of willing to kind of accept any bugs and things like that as well. But I think we're still probably trying to find what our repeatable channel is. I think the ones we're going after at the moment, as I mentioned to you, I think we still don't know that they're necessarily the best ones, and they're probably going to change over time as well. But it's difficult to kind of settle on one, especially when, as you say, you see people doing all sorts of other things. I just saw this guy write a thread on Google Ads, and this seems like the way to go. And then you try that out for a little while, and it's difficult to know like how long you should try something for before kind of switch into something else, because like how much money should you invest, which experts should you speak to, and how long should you persist with it? Like, is it a question of your product, or is it a question of your execution of that marketing strategy? I think that's like one of the most difficult things that we've seen.
Yeah, that's all. I that really resonates. I mean, just with No Code MBA, we were talking a little bit before the call as well. Like I've tried Google Ads, for example, and it didn't work. I wasn't able to do it profitably. And right, it's kind of a matter of how much do you want to spend before you kind of make that decision. For me, I guess, yeah, I mean, it's also being confident that the person you're working with is the right person also, and I did feel like he was. I think he really knew what he was doing, but that's also always, important to feel comfortable with that. And there's been multiple marketing channels where I've kind of tried, and you put in, a few $1,000s, and if it's not really getting you the ROI, then I've shut it down. But I think that doesn't mean that it'll always not work, but it might just not be the right time in the product to make it work, is kind of my mindset around that.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that it's hard to quantify as well is you can be super data driven with these things and say like, okay, well, I know what my lifetime value is for a customer, and therefore I know what I'm willing to spend on my acquisition costs and things like that. But actually, you also get kind of the hard to quantify metrics like awareness as a tool as well. So like an association with things. So for instance, we were doing ads in Superhuman, which is like an AI, quite a big AI newsletter. We did a few paid ads in there for a while, and I think like, firstly, you've got the problem of attributing where customers come from. Yeah, some of them are going to click on the link, but others are just going to go off and Google it afterwards.
Yep.
Maybe like bookmark the email and then go back to it ages later. But also the fact that you're advertising those things gives you some more credibility and professionalism, because people think, oh, okay, well, they can afford to kind of be up with other tools like, I don't know, Jasper or something else, things that are more well recognized, and therefore as a result you get this kind of positive affirmation about your
Yep.
products that means that people feel more confident recommending it to other people in their business. And those are things that, like, you're not going to see that come through as an acquisition cost or a low acquisition cost, but it does provide tangible benefit to the business. And so it's hard to know. Similar with Google Ads as well. Like if your business is at the top of like a search page, again, people might not click on it the first time. Maybe they click on it the seventh time, or next time
Right.
they think about that thing, they click on it. But yeah, it's hard in the cold light day when you're seeing the when you're paying out the money and you're seeing like few conversions in a channel to be like, no, I should persist with this.
Right, totally. And especially when it's earlier on and you don't have as big of a marketing budget and you kind of need to
Yeah.
focus more on ROI. But I agree. And I've done some newsletter advertisements as well. And actually similarly, they worked more in the beginning. Now maybe that was because there was more AI hype and I was marketing the AI course, our no code MBA. Maybe there's just some diminishing returns as well on it. And also, it's hard to always attribute exactly where it's coming from. But I don't know. Do you get emails from different newsletters now, like every day, asking
So
to
many.
advertise?
So many, literally. Like, I saw you advertising Superhuman, therefore I would like to take all your money.
Right.
Yeah, literally. Oh, so many. And the thing is, like, we also went quite data heavy on them. There's a really good platform you might have heard of called Passion Fruit, which is a good way to find newsletter sponsorship spots. And they put like all the stats in of like click-through rates and all that kind of stuff. And so, like, in the absence of other data, you can use that as a starting point to say, okay, well, if I get this many click-throughs on this audience, then how many do I need to convert for this to be viable? And like, we kind of did all the analysis on that and saw that most of them wouldn't have been kind of viable for us. But yeah, I think we had one the other day who were asking for, I think they're asking for $10,000 for a spot on a newsletter, which was just, and they're like, oh yeah, we'll get you 400 click-throughs or something. I was like, I'm not selling like insurance or cars here, so it's probably not going to be a good avenue for us.
Yeah, it's interesting how so many. I did the same math, and most of the newsletters, the math just doesn't really add up unless you're selling something super expensive. And for me, I think I was looking for like a $40 cost per 1,000 opens. I think that's, if I'm remembering correctly, like approximately what I was looking for. But a lot of them were like $100 or $150 per cost per. So, I mean, I mean, great. If they're able to get people to spend that, then that's great for them. But for me, it was hard to find many that were kind of in that range.
Definitely. And I think like, so some of the best ones we found were like really small ones where it's just like a few thousand people on a mailing list, whatever, that they charge next to nothing for. They just kind of want to put an ad up. And because then it's kind of like, even if you get one or two customers from that, then it can be worthwhile, as opposed to like being a huge investment each time. So yeah, that was one of the things that we found.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, just a warning to anyone: before you do a newsletter ad, you will get contacted by every other newsletter to trying to get
it's such
forever.
a good like distribution like channel for them to see, okay, how do we find people to advertise? We'll just look at who has already advertised. It's great.
Yeah. Oh, totally. I would do the same thing if I were them. But there needs to be some like well, I mean, it's nice sometimes, it might make sense, right? So it's not always a bad thing, but it's just funny. Yeah. So in terms of the product itself, I know, at least if I remember correctly, previously you built it with Bubble.
Yep.
Is it still built with Bubble? Are there any, as far as you know, kind of additional code that you've added onto it? How is the product built? And I know I think your co-founder is the developer, if
Yep.
that's correct. But I guess if you could speak to whatever kind of you know about the product.
Yeah. So basically, the entire front end is all Bubble, and was from the start and still is. And we think that is still like the best way for us to build, because it means we can build so much so quickly. We can fix things quickly. We can react to things quickly. We can change the look and feel of things very easily as well. So I think like we have absolutely no regrets about doing that, and I think we'll continue to do it while it's kind of still viable. I mean, we do have one eye on the Bubble pricing update, which we're locked in until like, what is it, November or something next year. And I think at that point it might become a bit sketchy for us to stay on Bubble. But up until then, like, we're very happy with it. And then, yeah, as I say, the back end is pretty much all Python. It's written all completely coded. I think the other quite cool thing I think Alex has realized is like everything that there was a lot of things that we built that we just didn't think would be possible. And after kind of speaking to a few people, we were able to do it. So like things like being able to put a chat widget on other people's sites, that's all with Bubble. So that was something that we haven't seen other people do before. Or being able to use custom domains on Bubble. That's something that is like quite a difficult thing for a lot of people to do, and we had to kind of find quite a neat way to do it, and it just makes us kind of a bit more innovative. Like, I mean, what's the phrase, necessity is the mother of all invention. So like if we need to offer this product or feature or something, then we'll find a way to make it happen. And so far, touch wood, we haven't found anything that we haven't been able to do with Bubble. I think sometimes it just takes a bit more ingenuity and a bit of outside the box thinking from Alex to figure out a way around it.
Yeah, no, I definitely kind of test that like I think Bubble is more powerful than people might think. I mean, it's hard to run into something that you really can't build.
Yeah.
And also the community is so strong that kind of like what you said, if there's something that you are stuck on, usually there's either like an answer in the forum or there's someone that you can speak with that knows how to do it. And it's at kind of a really good point in its product now that I think the community is large enough that it's not like you're completely in the dark. Pretty much anything that you want to do, someone has already done it, I think.
Yeah.
Which is you're not going to be the first one to do it. And I think the other thing that's amazing, I mean, just Bubble, it's no code, but I think some people might think of no code as kind of being limited, or it's not going to seem professional, or it's not going to seem as good. But no one would ever know using AskAI whether it's whatever, they wouldn't know the framework that it's being built on. It's just it's doesn't matter if it's Python or whatever, Ruby, or if it's Bubble, right? It's just gonna work, and then it also gives you the ability, like we talked about earlier. Every 2 weeks, there's a new feature that's being built, and it's not like you have a team of 10 developers, which you would need if it were coded. It's just one person. Yeah,
That's exactly it. Like Alex is the one who does all the Bubble work. We have a couple of developers, but they're purely on the Python back end, and they're kind of freelance for a few hours here and there. But yeah, pretty much everything is just one person building this. And I think we've actually got a new update coming out for our chat widget soon. And I'm probably biased, but I personally think like the new widget that we're putting out is probably one of the nicest looking of the chat widgets, like on a par with things like Intercom or anything like that. And I think it's just cool that you can do that all with Bubble. I think the only probably annoyances that we have with Bubble are probably that won the little update banner that we're kind of forced to have that everyone will have seen. But I saw it on Bubble's site themselves the other day, so I know that they feel the pain too. And the other one is probably occasionally like there's some elements of speed, because obviously as soon as you put another platform or an intermediary into a service, it's going to be slower slightly.
Yeah.
But even with that, it's not been kind of a massive problem. We found ways around most of it, and I think as well, when you get to certain speeds, it becomes kind of imperceptible, like the differences between other services. And I think like kind of at the start, when OpenAI was a little bit slower with response times and things, it was a bit more noticeable. But now I think we're at a stage where you'd be hard pressed to tell the difference, and we don't really get anyone complaining about it or anything like that. So yeah, I think like as a way to get started and get up and running, I mean, considered like the whole MVP of this product, which was something that there were no platforms that were doing what we were doing at the start, and we built it. Well, Alex built it in like 3 weeks or so on Bubble, and I just don't think that could have been done so quickly using kind of code and things.
No, it's totally. Yeah, 100%. And it's also kind of, if you ever did run into an area where, okay, you really need to switch off of Bubble, you know, at this point you're at 20K MRR. Maybe at that point you'd be at whatever 50K out. You're making money, and now you have the resources to potentially, if you really needed to rebuild it in a different platform or something like that. Whereas if you're kind of worried about that when you have 0 MRR, you'll never get to anything.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Like, and I think like that's the way that we can test things like so quickly. And if we want to kind of spin up a side product or something like that, we can do that. We can just put we have like a summarized product we're thinking of spinning out as a side product. It will probably take less than a day. And in fact, we built it kind of internally into our tool in less than a day. And I think there are so many like things like that you can do, and then wait until you actually experience the pain that requires you to move to something else. But also know that everything's going to slow down when you do move. Like there's going to be kind of code review requests and all sorts of things that you need to think about that you just don't need to worry about with Bubble.
Yeah, totally. In terms of I think something that some people might think about, using different AI tools, especially when it's their own company data, is security. Is there anything like that you do to keep data secure, or anything outside of kind of what Bubble and maybe OpenAI and Pinecone and different platforms that you're kind of connecting to already have integrated? Is there anything that like anyone who's building an AI product that might touch company data should be aware of?
So it's slightly relevant in that I'm just writing up all of our GDPR compliance documents, so which has been a really fun job. It was kind of one of these things that we looked everything up and kind of knew we were compliant, but we just hadn't written it all down. So now we're going through that process, and I think like as a starting point, you look for things. In our case, like data processing agreements, really exciting, but they basically show like the security of the data that's flowing through the systems, and you can ensure that every service provider you're using, from Bubble to OpenAI, etc., are dealing with your data in a kind of responsible and secure way. One of the things we did in addition that has kind of been good and bad was that we made a decision early on to not store any of the documents that people upload to AskAI. So when you upload a document, we'll scrape all the text out of it and break that up into chunks, and then we delete the document. So if you wanted us to give you your document back or show you your document, we just couldn't do it. And that, in our minds, like it kind of reduces the likelihood that there's like this honeypot of company documents and data that you could access. And even if like the worst were to happen and you were to kind of hack our vector database or something like that, it'd be pretty hard, or slash not, you'd be at it for a little while to work out how to reconstruct all this data into something usable. So I think like it is and it isn't kind of a secure way. Obviously, like all the data kind of is encrypted as it's kind of been passed through any of these processes. And I think as well, because we use OpenAI via API, that means that nothing is trained on OpenAI's models aren't trained on that data, whether that be embeddings or completion requests. So overall, you're working with like a lot of big companies, a lot of big names who have a lot of their procedures well documented. So I think as long as you're putting that together in a thoughtful way, then you're generally okay.
And is that something that companies are concerned about, or when you're working with larger companies, that's something that they're asking before working with you?
Some are, some aren't. Some kind of accept that. I think some go into it the mindset that all these companies are new. There's not going to be many out there who do have X, Y, and Z certifications or compliance certificates, and so they accept a kind of level of risk. And I think therefore they maybe use it just with like public information to start with. Like, I mean, if you're uploading like a website or something like that, I mean, it doesn't matter if that's leaked into public information anyway. So I think that's probably the way that most people think about it, is we'll start on something that it doesn't matter. If worst came to worst, if it was leaked. And then we do get like some questions on it. And the reason I'm writing this document right now is because there's been some bigger clients who are kind of asking for it. And it's also something that like it takes a while to do, but it can also be a differentiator as well, in that not everyone's going to sit down and go through and do this kind of thing. So I think it is something that can help. But yeah, it's definitely not a kind of prerequisite, and we definitely didn't have any of this stuff written down from day one. So I think it's definitely something you do when you get a few people asking about it, but not before.
Yeah. In the past, I had a project when I was building Conference Tap, which is like online events software. I built it with Bubble, and I haven't been focusing much on it lately. But back about a year ago, when I was trying to get customers, there was one customer in the UK, and they asked about GDPR, and that sent me down like a rabbit hole for about 2 days of like what that even means, and how to do all the I ended up I ended up doing kind of my best attempt at creating all of those documents and the data processing agreements and things like that. So it seems like something these large companies, it's almost like they have a box to check, I feel like, where they need to have that essentially.
I can attest to that as well. Like I think it really is something that they just need something they can link to or something in a way, because as an example of how diligently these things are prepared, if you look at OpenAI's data processing agreement, which I've just read today, they actually refer to their product as Chat GTPT. So I mean, that's on their actual site. So it's clear that they put a lot of effort into reading and reviewing this thing. So
their lawyers should be listening to this and fix that. And obviously, I think the principles of GDPR are good, right? And you want to have secure data, but I think as long as you're doing the best you can to keep that secure and do what they're trying to do, have you do.
Well, I think this is the thing, and I think like part of the problem as well is it's not necessarily pragmatic advice a lot of the time. Like Alex and I, two-person business, whatever, and it requires you to do things like have data protection officer and to go through like these training things and to do all this kind of stuff. And it's just like, what's the pragmatic version of that is the first thing. And the second thing is like, it took me probably a day of just a combination of asking ChatGPT plus looking at tons of different SaaS websites to work out what I actually needed to produce to do this. And in the end, like I've come up with what I think we should have, but there is no like formulaic checklist of these are the things you need. And I actually think it's a really good SaaS idea to create all these things for people, because a lot of it is just like looking things up, and that's probably a good like bubble project, to be honest.
No, that's totally true. You just have to be willing to do all the work and administrative work of
Yeah,
in the first place. But I totally agree. I think it's a good idea. In terms of the product itself and kind of competitors, there are other
yep.
companies that are doing similar things in a similar space. How do you all think about that? And kind of standing out? Is it maybe do you think okay, the market's so big that we don't worry too much about that, and the pie is big enough for everyone? Kind of how do you think about competitors in this type of space?
Yeah, so I think we have a few different thoughts about it. So the first one is that you're right, like it's such a big pie that we don't need to be like cannibalizing one another's customers or anything like that. I think we actually looked up some stats on how many websites have chatbots, and I think if you were to add together Intercom, Crisp, Drift, HubSpot, Talk2, basically like all the big chatbot providers together, cumulatively take up about 9% of websites globally. So like you consider that, all right, not every website's going to have a chatbot, but maybe they should, like in some ways. I kind of feel like chatbots is in some way the bridge between like a product, its UX, and like docs and things like that, because not everyone's going to read docs. You're not always going to make the best UX, and so it's kind of the kind of plaster that fits in between those two. So I think that's the first thing. It's definitely like a big enough market. I think in terms of kind of some of the ways we differentiate, if we're focusing on kind of what we've done to date, we've tried to focus on a few things. First one is trying to make it like the simplest tool that you can use to kind of make an AI chatbot. By kind of putting tons of documentation together, we make it kind of just a few clicks to do, lots of integrations and things, no technical terms. We don't refer to kind of tokens anywhere. We tried not to refer to models or anything like that too much. We basically tried to make it so anyone could come on, drop some files, and then or web pages, and then build something out at the end. It took us a while before we actually even exposed like things like the system prompts, because we kind of thought for a lot of people that's just a kind of a step too far and unnecessary kind of noise. So focusing on it being like super simple is definitely one of the things that we tried to do then. And also that kind of comes from Alex and I's background as working in product management. And then we also try to kind of make it the most one of the most integrated tools. So we've got, as I mentioned before, kind of Slack, Teams, WhatsApp integrations, Zapier integrations. So you can kind of Notion, Drive, etc. So you can kind of plug it into lots of different places, which is something most of the tools you'll see out there, it will be maybe just PDF, maybe PDF and website, and then occasionally you get kind of a smattering of the other ones, but we're kind of like the one-stop shop where you can do it all and do it all quite simply. And I think the third kind of way that we try to set ourselves apart is we're visible and contactable. And I think that's again something a lot of these sites will just put their own bot on their site, and then you can never talk to someone if you're having a problem with it. And because it's such a new space, and there's always going to be bugs, there's always going to be people trying to use it in ways that you never expected, then having someone to reach out to and talk to and share feedback with can be valuable. And so Alex and I always try to make ourselves like quite available to users as well. So I think the pie is probably big enough overall for people to continue flooding into the space if they wanted to. That's kind of how we separate ourselves out. And then from now on, like one of the things we're trying to kind of focus more on a bit more of a niche of SaaS customer support. And the reason we want to kind of focus on that a bit more is that there's much more awareness of AI amongst SaaS tools. They generally have like pretty good sets of documentation that are available on their website. And we think that we can make something that would essentially be almost like the first line of defense for these SaaS companies. So essentially what you would do is you would come onto the SaaS products site. First interaction would be with an AskAI. We would allow a human handover to whatever tool you currently have. So if you have kind of Intercom or whatever, if you can't answer a question, it just flicks to intercom, you can continue. But I think where people miss out and miss opportunities is the fact that with customer support, one of the most valuable things is hearing and talking to your customers, getting feedback, hearing about bugs, hearing about issues, hearing about ways people want to use it, getting testimonials and all those kinds of things. And I think that's the kind of stuff that you, if you were to just use an AI chatbot, or most of them, or if you were to outsource your customer support, those are all things you miss out on. So the kind of next step for us is we want to kind of be, yes, we're an AI chatbot to start, but then we're going to help you mine all the insights of those conversations so you can see, okay, well, you've had a spike in kind of bug requests for X feature recently, or 10 people have suggested this new feature, and do all that automatically. So you don't even need to like trawl through the data, read through the conversations, because a lot of these tools will have like conversation histories, but how many people are reading through kind of every conversation to see what's going on? It just doesn't make sense. And so we want to kind of provide actionable tools and insights off the back of these conversations that turn it from being something that's like saving you costs in a cost center to something that not only does that, but then gives you like product development growth opportunities and things.
Yeah, that's great. I think those are all great ideas, and I think what you're doing also makes a lot of sense in terms of differentiation and also just building more of a moat around kind of your product, and going from, just like a very basic AI chatbot, which, someone can spin up quickly with, Bubble and OpenAI and Pinecone. There's a no code MBA tutorial that you could build a very simple version in a few hours. But that's the case for most products, right? Like you can build a very simple version in a few hours, but where I think the mode of like all the integrations that you all have, and then all the specialized features and all of that, at least on the product side, and then plus there's all the brand and marketing and user side that you all have. But yeah, I think that it's really smart what you all are doing. So that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, the building point's interesting. Like we actually, people will come to us and say, oh, can't I just build this myself using Bubble or LangChain or whatever? And we say, go for it. Like it's super interesting. You'll learn a lot. And I think you can get something usable very quickly, but then there's actually so many levels of optimization or improvements. Like there could be everything from deciding how many chunks you're going to pull out of the data, what the overlaps of those is going to be, what models you're going to use, how many chunks you're going to use in your answer, what's your prompt going to be written like to ensure that it's not going to hallucinate. There are just like so many that's and then you've got all your kind of query requests and all sorts of things you can do with semantic search. It's like there is such a long tail of things you can do to optimize for certain use cases and all that kind of stuff, that a lot of the time, if you want to use it in a production sense, it just doesn't make sense a lot of the time to build it yourself. I mean, if as an example, OpenAI changed their model. It was still ChatGPT or GPT 3.5, but they changed the underlying thing behind it sometime in end of June or July, I think it was. Instantly, it basically wasn't listening to kind of system prompts and that kind of stuff. And so overnight, people's answer quality went like tanked. Now, if you were to try and like manage that yourself, and you're only using your question data and things like that to try and work out how to improve it, then it can take you a while. And especially if you don't have the background, the context of having done this stuff daily. And we ended up building kind of our own evaluation tool based on sets of like hundreds of gold standard questions and answers. So we can like determine small changes to prompts or optimizations. We can see how that impacts the answer quality, so we know what we need to do. We can react to it quickly, and it's those kinds of things that, as I say, it's just not worth doing yourself a lot of the time.
Right. Like, totally. Like you're going to invest a ton of resources into building your own it doesn't make sense, and it just makes sense to pay someone like AskAI to do that for you, basically. And that's the case with most software. Obviously, you can
Yeah,
build,
yeah,
you can build any SaaS software yourself if you really want to,
for sure.
but it doesn't. That's why SaaS exists, and it makes sense
Yeah.
to rent that and rely on someone else's expertise in building that. Um, in terms of I guess the future and what your future goals are, what are you kind of looking at with that, and then how has that potentially changed with the fact that you haven't raised the money, or do you want to raise money, and kind of how do you think about, or maybe you haven't and I'm not aware, but how do you think about bootstrapping or raising money as well, along with your future goals?
I think we made quite a conscious decision early on that we wanted to bootstrap,
Okay.
and that was partly because Alex had previously gone through and been the founder of a venture company, a venture-backed company, and I think while he enjoyed the experience at the time, I think it was also kind of stressful. It's something that you then have to think about optimizing for different people as well. Like, are you optimizing for the investors or for your customers? And right now, our only stakeholder really is our customer. They're the people that we have to build for, and they're the people who we're responsible to. And I think like that means you get complete direct alignment with your products, and you're not thinking about, oh, okay, well, I need to spend tons on advertising because I need to grow at X rate in order to hit these targets to unlock the next funding round or whatever. Whereas we can really kind of dig down into saying, no, let's try and really optimize for like our North Star of, like, I don't know, conversations had or something like that.
Yeah.
So I think like that was one thing that we kind of decided quite early on. And I think like there's also the question of like scale. As soon as you kind of raise venture funding, almost certainly a lot of the money is going to go into building a team, having more people. And right now, given it's just me and Alex, like we can battle through most things like in a few hours, a day max, whatever. We can make decisions super quickly. There's no kind of requirement for stand-ups, there's no communication difficulties, anything like that. And again, that helps contribute to us being able to move very quickly. And so I think like that's really the way we probably want to stay until we get to a point that we just can't sustain it, really, I think. And I think also the other thing is that we spoke earlier about kind of necessity being the mother of invention. I think by not having too much, it forces you to really strictly prioritize and just focus on kind of what matters. Like if you have pools of money, it's very easy just to kind of throw it away on certain features or certain marketing and distribution channels. Whereas how we're set up now, we really kind of critically assess what's going to be the best thing for us, and we just focus on the things that are going to move the needle rather than kind of the long tail of fluff and other features that we don't need to worry so much about. And I think that is again something that being bootstrapped forces you into. I think we definitely kind of have our sights on continuing to grow AskAI. I think if we were offered like, I don't know, a big number, then we would probably sell it. It's not that it's not that we're kind of glued to it in that way. But I think at the moment, like we're very much kind of enjoying learning a lot. I probably haven't learned as much about business and products in any time in my career than I have in the last 6-9 months. So I think happy still doing that and continuing to grow it and seeing where we can take it, really. I guess
I think that's go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, I guess like the goal is just like bigger and bigger clients, bigger and bigger contracts, continue to do interesting things. We'd love to kind of have a proper play around with some AI agents and integrating some of those into our products. Like there's just so many interesting things with AI, and I think there's a bit of a question about whether do we keep adding things into our products or do we spin them out as separate things, and that's like part of the problem as well.
Yeah, I think it's a great place to be. And I think having customers and having being where you are in the product development and where AI is as well, and where it's developing, it is a super exciting place where you all are, and you can kind of keep learning about AI and building more useful things for customers, and doing it without the pressure of VC kind of
Yeah.
pushing you to go in one direction or the other. So I think that's awesome. I guess just to finish up, is there anything else you want to share? Where can people find you or find Ask AI?
Yeah, sure. So you can find us at myaskai.com. And we're also on Twitter under use myaskai. So if you want to kind of email us, reach out to us, if you need a demo or anything like that, I'm happy to do that as well. But it's super easy to set up. We reckon you can build an AskAI in under a minute. We actually have a really fun promo that's going to be we're trying to record at the moment, where a customer actually asked as if he could do this for us, and we said of course, because he wants to do a skydive where he builds an AskAI while falling, and he's tested out and he's able to kind of do it, and so we're going to hopefully get that recorded and shared soon. But that will kind of attest to the simplicity of which you can use AskAI.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, thanks so much for joining the podcast. I think this was a really great interview and really insightful about building a business and building an AI business specifically. So hopefully be helpful to people. And again, if anyone is interested in building their own AI assistant, definitely check out AskAI. I can attest to what you're saying. It's super simple to set up and really easy. So there's no reason not to go try it out. So yeah, thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Seth.
Thanks for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to build your own AI applications like AskAI or text or image generation apps using Bubble, which is a no-code tool, and other AI services such as OpenAI or Stable Diffusion, check out No Code MBA's Building Apps with AI course, and you can use the promo code podcast10 to save 10% off your No Code MBA membership. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode.